Hello and welcome back to another video around the Summer Game Fest Summer of Gaming announcement weekend. This is the second video of 3 in this series, so I do apologize if I'm doing a lot of chatty topical videos lately. It's just I want to get a few things through, and I am still working on reviews and deep dives and all those sorts of lovely stuff in the background, so please bear with. And yeah, let's crack into today's topic. This year's Summer Game Fest was the most watched Summer Game Fest ever. No matter what and no matter how much people complain year on year, the viewership just keeps going up each year. And what usually brings people into this sort of thing is just the announcements and the sheer volume of announcements and trailers that you get during the show. And this is what people come for. This is what people want to watch. And the main trailer they had to wrap the showcase up, which is usually the big, the strong one, this was something that, for me personally, was massively anticipated, as well as just a great surprise because it just came out of nowhere. I am, of course, talking about Resident Evil 9 Requiem. I call it Resident Evil 9 Requiem. It's not quite that. What it is it's Resident Evil Requiem, the same way that Resident Evil 8 was Resident Evil Village. But what they did was they did some magic with the Q in Requiem to make it look like a 9 and flickered in and out of being a 9. So they're saying Resident Evil 9 is Resident Evil Requiem. And what I want to do today, I want to talk a bit about the trailer. I'm not going to go too in-depth on it. I know that there'll be tons of videos out there around here's every single shot-by-shot thing and what it means. The usual over-analysis of any trailer that comes out. But I just want to talk about, give you some of the details around the trailer, show you some clips of it, and then we'll get into why I think that this game direction and the title specifically seems to be hinting at maybe's, not the death of the franchise, but maybe's just setting some old characters to rest and hopefully moving on and developing the series in a new direction that's new, fresh, and enjoyable. Starting out on the trailer, it was unsure and unclear what it actually was. A lot of people said it was the hair physics that sort of gave away that it was the RE engine, but this is set seemingly in the future-ish of Resident Evil 2. So this is the FBI agent. She's called Grace Ashcroft, and she's the daughter of a Resident Evil Outbreak character, Alyssa Ashcroft. Now, I played Resident Evil Outbreak years ago. I think it was on the PS2, something like that. I played it through then. I didn't really gel with it that much because back then we couldn't get the online features to work. So I have a very limited knowledge of Outbreak and how it works. But I do believe she's a fan favorite character in the hardcore community, which is just great to see. But it's more a case of they're using a spin-off character, which essentially would make Outbreak canon, which a lot of people are excited about. But I do love the idea of finding characters that are tied to the universe that aren't necessarily the main characters, as it were. As I say, she's an FBI agent, and the trailer starts out in the FBI office, but it quickly goes over to show you a post-apocalyptic Raccoon City, which we've never seen before. We've never returned to Raccoon City. After it gets bombed at the end of Resident Evil 3/Resident Evil 2, there is no time that we return in the entire franchise to this location. So it's great to see, and the possibilities are essentially endless at what could happen with zombies and the infected and the virus and all the different creatures that were there just left to rot over all the time. Because you can see from the bomb explosion itself, there's still a lot of city still standing. There's a big crater, obviously, but it's turned into sort of a nuclear desert wasteland where radiation plus T-virus and G-virus probably doesn't end very well. The setup of the story seems to be a serial killer type story, with Grace trying to track them down as well as trying to find out what happened to her mother. There's an awful lot of hooded figures in this trailer. There's rumors of Leon, mainly Leon. There's been rumors of Chris, because Chris is in practically every game nowadays. But I think the main thing is focused around Leon because he was a survivor of Raccoon City, and it just makes sense to bring back a Raccoon City character in the Raccoon City game. If they do show up, I don't want Leon to be a playable character. Might be a bit of a controversial take. My favorite Resident Evil is Resident Evil 4, so it is quite a controversial take to say you don't want to play as Leon. But to be perfectly honest, I'll get to it later, but I would like to see what happens with new characters. But we'll see. I think if they do come back, they should come back in sort of an advisory role or someone who propels the story forward or gives some context on something, rather than it being someone you actually play as. And speaking of the characters, Grace herself, this is one of the things that I'm more interested in, because Resident Evil 7 had Ethan Winters and so did Resident Evil 8, and he was a completely different character from the main series, and he just had a bit more, especially in 8, he had a bit more personality to him, and it just felt like they were trying to do something new and you could actually feel scared rather than being one of these veteran characters like Leon or Chris or Jill or Claire, where no matter what, they could just do backflips through things and shoot people in the face. There was a suspension of disbelief that you had to have with any of those characters, and they just felt like one-man armies by the time you would get to a modern-day sequel. They just feel like unstoppable tanks of characters rather than anyone you would actually feel genuinely scared with, especially when you look at stuff like Resident Evil 6 where people are suplexing and everything. It gets to the point where they just seem a bit too seasoned to be in a horror setting. They're kind of pushed and propelled into an action setting. There's not much you can do with that. Grace herself, on the other hand, is a very meek character. You sort of get the feeling in the trailer, with the whole pushing up of the glasses and shuffling and dropping the papers and all that sort of stuff. The classic Hollywood nerd stereotype. That's the sort of thing that they seem to be going for here. So she is FBI trained, so she'll be trained how to use firearms, she'll know survival skills, she'll know close quarters combat, all those sorts of things. So she will be able to handle herself, but she doesn't have the personality type of the strong, silent type, like sort of Chris, or maybe it's even Leon. She doesn't have the ruggedness or the sheer hardiness that Claire or Jill have. So it'd be interesting to see through her eyes the sort of horror we can actually experience and what sort of themes they're going to go for. Because with the mother being dead and all that sort of thing, maybe it's like a study on grief or something, I don't know. But I'm very excited to see where the new character goes more than anything else. Some of the leaks were a bit on point with the setting, more in the fact of everyone's been saying it's going to be an open world game. And looking at the setting of the trailer with Raccoon City, I've heard things about there being a hotel, like a big hotel being the main hub of where everything takes place. But it does look like we're going to get open sections, a bit like Resident Evil Village, where you can go out and explore things, and there's going to be more to do in those open settings. And as long as you don't lose the horror aspect of it, I'm all for it personally. There's also been some gameplay dropped, and the reason why this video didn't go out last Friday like I originally intended to, instead I released the Silksong video, was because I was gonna wait and see what happened, because there was a talk about people seeing behind the scenes demo gameplay. I think it's like a half an hour gameplay demo that everyone got to see behind closed doors at Summer Game Fest. Well, obviously we weren't privy to that, so I kind of waited to see what people said and came out of that with. And I think the biggest thing that came out of it was the fact that you can freely switch between first and third person perspectives, which they've been playing around with ever since Resident Evil Village came out with the DLC, the Rose DLC. I can't remember, Rule of Rose? I'll put it up on screen, something of Rose. But basically, essentially, they added in third person and first person viewpoints for Ethan when you were playing that game, and you could essentially switch between them pretty much at will through the pause menu. This is still the same case. I think for a horror game, first person does tend to go better than third person. It just depends what you're doing. And I think if you get into a more action set piece, you probably will want third person combat. Me personally, I would want that. But then in the close quarters hotel stuff where you're sneaking around and there's something chasing you or whatever, I think that would be better in first person. So I think they've managed to finally do away with the third person versus first person debate and just give you both, which is great. The behind closed doors also gave us a little bit of insight into the pace of the game. So everyone's saying it's very much Resident Evil 7, slow, methodical, stalking around that house in Resident Evil 7. It feels very much like that here. There's a lot less sprinting around a castle like you would in Resident Evil 4 or running around a ruined city, which you kind of get in Resident Evil 2. I think this one's going to go for more horror focused, and I would love to see that, to be honest. I'm all for it. And it's really nice, to be honest, to see with all of these remakes kicking around where there's constantly theories around what's going to get remade next. They're going to remake this, going to remake that. It's great to see that Capcom appear to still be able to completely cook perfectly with this franchise. They can make brand new things without constantly just remaking everything. The only thing I've seen people really worried about with this game is that it's going to be a nostalgia fest. With it going back to Raccoon City, there's the potential to bring back everyone, more or less. There's the potential to go back to the original mansion. There's loads of stuff like that. And all I'll say to that is, this is meant to be the 30th anniversary. This game is going to be like the celebration of the 30th anniversary. So I think there's nothing wrong with bringing loads of different bits and pieces back and harkening back to older games in the franchise, older characters, tying everything together. But this is what I want to get into the meat of. I really want this to be what they have said, and what I want it to be the Requiem, the end of all of this stuff that they've been building up to this whole time. I would love to see that perfectly capped off so that the franchise can move forward, and I'll explain what I mean. When a franchise goes on as long as Resident Evil has, it only makes sense that eventually you're going to start running low on ideas. There's only so many times you can put a mansion with a lab in it, a city with a lab in it, a house in the bayou with a lab in it, a village with a lab in it. Do you see where I'm going? It was more of a factory in Resident Evil Village, but essentially there's somewhere where you're going to start reusing old ideas and you're going to start getting used to the tropes of the franchise. And they did try something new by switching it up to Ethan Winters and making it something completely fresh and brand new. But then at the end of the game, they tied it back in with Chris showing up at the very end, and then they started trying to like piece other bits in together with the DLC. And I think that in doing so, and then again in Resident Evil 8, really, that then tied back into the original series with mentions of Oswald Spencer. It's like they're trying to just tie everything together and make everything one cohesive thing. And for me, I think it's starting to hold it back a bit. But this is finally their chance to move away from their legacy characters and do something completely brand new. I know that they've tied in Grace with Alyssa from Outbreak, but that's so far removed from the main series and so far removed from the main canon that it's actually giving them a platform to start afresh. They're revisiting old areas. Yes, like I say, it's for the anniversary. I'm fully behind that, but I think what this game should be is this game should actually be the Requiem. Requiem suggests end to me. If you look at the definition of a Requiem, it is the end of something. It's sort of celebrating the end of something. It's an act of remembrance. So to me personally, I think this is time to just draw a line under all of that stuff and start anew. Because I love the characters of Chris, Jill, Claire, Leon, even Krauser. Krauser's on my list up there, but he's definitely gone. But people like Carlos, who only got one game, maybe it's a chance to bring some of them back to the fore and stop making everything revolve around those four characters, those old characters that everyone knows and loves, yes. But I feel like it starts weighing things down over time, where they start having to tie things back in and sort of worm things back in the franchise to make them cohesive and connect together to make it something. This feels like the right time to go back to Raccoon City and completely wipe the slate. I'd love to see new stuff that isn't always tied in with the old stuff. I don't want it to be at the very end of the game you find out Umbrella's at the cause of it. Let's have a new villain. Let's have a new character who we've never seen before. One who permeates through all of the games like Wesker does. Has their own 5-game arc where eventually they get blown up in a volcano. I'm totally down with people blown up in volcanoes. I don't mind. But I would love to see just more creativity, more freedom for Capcom to be able to make games that aren't burdened down by all of this old stuff that we need to bring into the future. They've remade stuff to make it easier to bring in, but I'm still just not entirely sold on the idea of everything has to fit into the canon. Everything has to fit into the franchise. If you look at games like Legend of Zelda, they're all their own complete standalone things to the point where someone had to come out with a big book with a big timeline on where they all fit in. It just resets to practically different multiverses to make it fit in. And I don't think people need to do that. I think games can just exist outside of their own huge canons. And eventually, when we get to almost game 10, it's time to start, looking at what else we can do that is separate from trying to tie everything together. I think 6 was them tying everything together, but because it went so badly, they just didn't know where to go next. And that was where it all started for me. Was I think they lost their way when it got to 6 with the attempt to tie everything together and everyone together. And then because it failed, they went on to Resident Evil 7, which was great. But then it just wasn't quite right. So they've got their chance to fix it now by spinning off to something else. and hopefully drawing a line under Raccoon City and moving on with the franchise, one hopes. I do think we'll get a bit more information come Gamescom. There is a playable demo supposedly rumored to be there at August, most likely the one that everyone saw behind the scenes. We'll get to play in August would be my guess, but we'll have to just wait and see. There were a few demos for Resident Evil 7 before we got our hands on it, and there was one for Resident Evil Village as well. So we'll have to just wait and see what they come out with. This may just be my old man Unk take on everything. You know, I get called Unk quite a lot in the comments apparently. So my take is just, I think that they've dropped the number because they're wanting to get to a wider audience. Over time, the more you see numbered on a franchise, the more you're going to be like, well, do I need to have played 1 through 8 to play 9? So that's why they're starting to call things like Village, Requiem. They're trying not to alienate the wider audience. They're trying not to put off people who've never played this game before. Yes, fans are going to get the most out of it, but they want new people too. And I think this is them just trying to make a game that's going to tie off all the old plot lines and hopefully, you know, just from my personal perspective anyway, hopefully make something brand new out of the franchise. Not necessarily starting again, because they've learned so much on how to create horror games, how to create survival horror games. They could make so much more with what they've learned so far, and the engine they've got's unreal. Not literally. But I just think that there's so much scope to make so much new stuff that doesn't have to be tied to the old legacy characters or anything. And not have to bend backwards to shoehorn things in, or at the very last minute, Leon comes out of nowhere and suplexes a monk or something like that, just to make sure that it all ties together. And this comes from a place of love. I've played every single Resident Evil game, with the exception of the Umbrella Chronicles and the RE-verse stuff. The multiplayer spin-off games, they're the only ones I haven't played. I played Operation Raccoon City. So I've played practically all of them at this point. I love Resident Evil as a franchise. I'm going to be there day one, no doubt. No matter what they come out with, I'll be there day one playing it. I'll no doubt give you a do I have time for this review on it. And hopefully it's great. I've got full faith in Capcom. I don't doubt that this is going to be a great game. I'm just hoping that they use it to do something great with the franchise itself. So rather than just propelling it forward with more of the same characters, more of the same themes, more of the same enemies and villains and all that sort of stuff, to do something new, to set a line in the sand and go, right, okay, Requiem is the end of the legacy stuff. Time to start with something new. Time to get some great new characters in. Time to get some names as iconic as Jill, Claire, Chris, Leon, Carlos. Have someone as iconic as that in a new role, in a new franchise. Someone you can root for, someone who becomes the new final girl of the franchise, all that sort of stuff. I would love to see it. So it all comes from a place of love, 100%. But that's just my take on it anyway. Thank you very much for watching today. Hopefully my allergies haven't come through too hard. I've been suffering quite badly recently. The pollen has just gone ridiculous, and me being a nerd, I cannot deal with it at all. So apologies if anything's come through and I sound like Squidward or something, but I've been holding them off as best as I can for you. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. Please let me know down in the comments what you would like RE9 to be, what you would like Resident Evil Requiem to contain, what you would like it to be about, and we'll have a little chat down in the comments below. In the meantime, I've been Gracious Rhino. Look after each other, and I'll catch you soon.